Right, I'm going to be talking about sports injuries, and within this, I'm going to talk about intrinsic and extrinsic factors. So, an intrinsic factor refers to a risk or a force from within the body. So, these may arise from training effects, individual variables, or postural effects. On the other hand, extrinsic factors is a risk or a force from outside the body. An extrinsic risk factor can cause harm or damage to yourself even though it's out of your control, whereas intrinsic, it's within your control. The first intrinsic risk factor I'm going to talk about is age. So with different ages, there'll be different muscle masses, there'll be different bone strength, and they'll have different abilities. So if an under 12 match was played against an over 18s match, injury would occur due to the fact that each player would have different bone strength, so the younger ones would have weaker bones, whereas the older ones would have more developed bones. So the weaker bones are more likely to be snapped under pressure, so this could cause broken leg or broken arm. Also, they have different muscle masses, so the under 12s would have less muscle than the over 18s. And also, it will come with different abilities. So as you get older, you'll be better at what you play. So, for example, rugby is quite a contact game, and a way to reduce this risk factor is having age groups. So you could have a 10 to 12 match, or you could have an under 12 match. So this is less likely to cause injury. And when they're too young, you could do no contact, so you could do tag rugby. So this will prevent any broken bones or any tearing of muscles. Next intrinsic factor I'm going to talk about is fitness levels. So your fitness level has to be adequate to what sport you're playing. So if you're running a marathon, you have to be very fit and aerobically fit, whereas if you're doing sprinting, you're more likely to have more muscle because it's anaerobic. So risk. So if you're running a marathon and you're not fit enough, or you might be slightly overweight, blood will be circulating the body to provide oxygen to the working muscles. However, if you're unfit or you're overweight, then fatty deposits can build up in these arteries, which could even lead to a heart attack. But also, not being prepared for what you're doing or doing no training, damage to your bones and damage to your muscles. So if you're running a marathon and you keep running on concrete, but you're unfit, or you might be too overweight, this could cause shin splints. And because there's no oxygen going to your muscles, or there's a lack of oxygen, you could feel faint. This could leave the individual feeling dizzy or even sick. A way to prevent this intrinsic risk factor is to be prepared for what you're doing. So if you're about to run a marathon, then you should have been training 6 months in advance, especially if you're unfit. So each day you'll build it up slowly. You wouldn't go straight into running 10k if you've never run before. You do a training program, you'd eat healthily, and this will prevent any risks. The last intrinsic factor I'm going to talk about is sleep disturbance. So if you don't have a lot of sleep, this can lead you to a loss of concentration. So a loss of concentration could be minor things like missing a ball, but then again, if you miss it, you might get hit with it, or you might slip over because due to your balance. And also, if you're not focusing, you'll play badly. And if it's in a contact game like rugby, then bad tackles can be made, which can lead to a broken ankle, leg, or even a broken arm. So to help prevent these risk factors, you should get the recommended 8 hours of sleep before a game. This will mean that you're awake and ready to go. And if you didn't have the 8 hours of sleep, or say you've been out on a night out beforehand, then you have a lack of concentration and a lack of focus, which again can lead to injury. Also, it's very important, as well as getting 8 hours of sleep, that the individual is hydrated. Hydration enables your brain to function properly, as well as getting enough sleep. So, the first extrinsic factor I'm going to talk about is poor technique. So, bad technique can lead to broken bones, strains, sprains, all sorts, especially when we're lifting weights. So, because it's extrinsic, it's out of your control. So if you were taught the technique in a bad way, it could lead to injury, but it could also lead to long-term injury. This can be something like a bad back. So if you're lifting weights, and they're heavy weights, and you're not lifting it in the correct technique, this can cause horrible injuries to your back, your legs, your arms, anything that's involved in with the weights. So a way to help control this extrinsic factor is if you feel any sort of pain while you're weightlifting or you're doing anything, then you should probably stop and maybe get proper coaching when you're doing it. Also, especially with weightlifting, don't lift weights that are out of your league. So if you've never really lifted any weights before, you start on light weights and then you go heavier and heavier each time you lift them, as your body's only just adapting to it. So this will help prevent injury. The next extrinsic risk factor is poor playing surfaces. So this could be icy conditions. So when the pitch is icy, this could cause someone to slip over on it and break an arm or break a leg. Also, if there's holes in the pitch, so people could fall down the holes, break an ankle, for example, or twist an ankle. So to prevent this from happening, there should be pitch checks regularly, and they should be carried out before every game. If holes are found, then they should be filled in with sand. This will help prevent them from any athletes from falling in them. Also, if the pitch is too icy or too hard, then the game should be cancelled, as this is more likely to cause broken bones than it is good. The final extrinsic risk factor is poor coaching. So if the coach loses concentration, this could put the participant in danger. So for example, if weightlifting is happening and they're being assisted, the coach shouldn't lose concentration. Because if they did and they were assisting them and something went wrong, then the individual might break a bone, hurt their back, or do something like that. Also, if the coach is lazy or uninterested, they might not be bothered to set out the equipment properly. And by doing this, they're putting the individual in danger. Also, they should be setting up prior to a session to make sure it's all done correctly. So, a way to help poor coaching. So the coach should really set out a risk assessment before any training match, any activity that takes place. Also, as I said, coming earlier prior to the session to set up and make sure everything's correct before the game happens. Due to our video not working, here are some of the outtakes.